welcome to the season 3 finale of the Middle-aged Bodcast with me, Raging Rich,
and me, T.A. Shelano.
T.A., I cannot believe it. We are here. It is the season 3 finale, the end of Bodcast Bootcamp.
Yeah, we've made it. We've got past 30 episodes in total now, Rich, which is quite an incredible feat from the beginning. But yeah, I don't know about Podcast Bootcamp. I think we need to go to Podcast Bootcamp between seasons, which will take me nicely into the final weigh-in results. Do we want to even look at this?
Well, yeah, come on, we need to do it. We've been looking into the weights all season and updating the listeners. So let's do the final weigh-ins and.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll start off with where we were at the beginning of the season.
Okay.
It's always a good start for 10, isn't it? So we started off, I was 19 stone 5 pounds, which is 123.2 kilos, and was devastatingly a pound heavier than you at 19 stone 4, which is 122.7 kilos. At the time of the last recording, we were out at, I was 19 stone 1, which is 121.4 kilos, and you were 19 stone 5, which is 123.2 kilos. And now this morning's weigh-in, because we have weighed in on the morning of the final recording, I am at 19 stone 3 pounds, which is 122.2 kilos, and you are 19 stone 5 pounds, which is 123.2 kilos. So ultimately, you've ended the season having put on a pound, and I've ended the season having lost 2. So not really what you'd consider as a season boot camp in any way, shape or form. And in reality, we're both, well, I'm only slightly lower than when we started season 1. You're a little bit certainly lower than season 1. But overall, we've not probably done as well as we might have.
Maybe not, but I do think, from my point of view, given some of the consumption of food, shall we say, over the course of recording this season, I will say I'm quite happy with that being roughly what I was at the start, because I did think actually it would have been a lot higher. So although it's not great, I will take the positive in. It could have been a lot worse.
Well, there's always a way of taking positives out of things. I think it's just difficult, isn't it? Sometimes where with best intentions and all that, it doesn't always work out as well as it might. I'm not going to sort of go over it in too much detail. People will no doubt be a bit like, well, 3 seasons and, between you've not really, but you know what?
I think we found other things though throughout the course of the seasons. And I think that's been the thing. The weigh-ins were something that was brought back by a few listeners sort of saying, look, you should bring that back. And we have. And actually, I think we found a lot of other things through the season, from talking to people about mental health, especially. I found that really interesting, and a lot of other things. So I do think there's still positives. There's still things out there that are, we can take a win from it for the season.
Well, indeed. And I think it's a point to talk about the positive news, Rich, which is that the contracts are with the lawyers for season 4. Written into season 4, I think we're going to have Shelano's Slimming and Raging Rich's recipes. Maybe that will get us back. That will get us back on track. But yeah, we will be coming back for season 4, which is, I don't know if I want to say back by popular demand. This might not be technically correct.
I think, we've had some really good success this season, actually, with stuff, and there's a lot to talk about as we reflect back on the season. A few surprising things that happened, and of course, some things that we did expect, but we'll be getting into that a little bit later. But I do believe something that debuted this season that will be returning in this episode is Shelano Speaks.
Well, yes, thank you very much for bringing me back into this. So it started off with the season with Raging, Ranting Rich was the idea, and you covered your great episode earlier on in the season around digital media versus physical media, yet did it in a non-ranting, actually beautiful way. And then weirdly, in a later episode of the season, I actually did get into much more of a ranting, raging way around coffee shops and apps. And back by certainly popular demand for me is this segment where I now have another section of retail society that has upset me since our last recording, Rich.
Okay, so do you want to give our listeners a bit of an update on this? Because I have to admit, when you told me about it the other day, I wasn't surprised about the people involved and what was going on. But yeah, just do you want to give us a bit of a history on it and a bit of what happened?
For legal reasons, I won't talk about the organisation that it is, I don't think, because I'm probably not going to be too polite. But I had it where, my mobile phone contract, 2-year contract had come to an end and I was due for a new phone. Fine, all great, the rest of it. And I went into my local shop of said quite big organizer, very big organisation, to explore opportunities for a new phone. And then it was there that it started to sort of disintegrate quite quickly, Rich, where it's like, but do you have your home broadband with us? Well, yes, actually, yes, we do. Oh, well, does your wife have her phone with us? Well, yes, she does. What's her number? Well, okay, why is that relevant? But yeah, oh, she's got the 10% discount for the broadband that you've got here. If you take out a new phone today, I've got to take that off her to give you, but I can give you some money back off net. Sorry, hang on a second. I came in here just to explore a new phone, just a new phone for me. Why is Mrs. Shelano getting involved? Why are you getting into trouble with my wife over me getting a new phone, right? It became this convoluted thing. And in the end, I did the best thing I could have done to try and avoid marital trouble, right? Was to say, I'm going to have to stop you there. I need to come back with my wife. Now, there's two things about that. One, that's perfectly fine because it was drifted into decision making that affect my wife. They wanted to sell us TVs, packages, you name it, right? Her phone, my phone, your phone, Rich, pay for whoever's phone. And it got into all of this sort of stuff. And I was like, right, these decisions aren't about me, so I'm going to have to go back. But there is a slightly awkward thing of having to be in a shop as a sort of a grown adult. It felt like going, can I ask my mum? I'm going to go, I'm going to have to bring my wife back. This is some quite demeaning experience. I've gone in for a new phone, and suddenly, I've got to go and come back with Mrs. Shelano, and made an appointment suggestion of going back. And I still got into trouble with Mrs. Shelano because she was like, "Oh, I've got to go and do that, have I?" Well, unfortunately, and explain the situation and whatnot. Anyway, we go back to the shop. And he goes through the whole rigmarole around giving me the 10%, but she loses the 10%. But if we take out this package, we get this off what we're paying for the broadband now, but they can offer us this TV, blah, blah, blah. And then if she takes the Netflix back, and in the end, you go through all the figures and you're like, so what are the actual figures here? Which they didn't have. They just throw you, it's this for the 6 months, it's this for 12 months, it's this on year 2. You feel like you're on the stock market, it's like buying 5 shares. Look, what is the deal here? Somebody help me. And in the end, I was with a pen and paper, and I'm sorry, Rich, because I know you're an IT guru and all the rest of it, right? There I was, old school, pen and paper, doing my maths, doing my sums. I was working it like I went, well, that's more than you're saying it is over 2 years than that package, which you're not presenting a true representation to me as a consumer, which I don't like. It's like you're deliberately trying to con me. And then that's what that will leave us with if we do that and do that and the rest of it. And even Mrs. Shelano was going, oh, I thought you were embellishing this story about when you come in here and they got into all this. And I've been here 10 minutes and you're not. Clearly, this is really annoying. She was also very upset because, for reasons best known to Mrs. Shelano, she really likes our existing router.
Oh, yes, I know this
Right?
story.
And they said, you can't keep your existing router. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing around environmental stuff and whatever and how effective the point of having a router for 2 years that's perfectly fine and replacing it with another router for no apparent reason. But that's what they'd said we'd got to do. And the best of it was, I knew, having seen it the day I went in on my own, she wouldn't like it. And when we went back with Mrs. Shelano, right, he goes, yeah, that is the router up there that you're going to have. And she turned around and said, it looks like Darth Vader's helmet. And, do you know, this guy looked almost offended by that, right? But I was at that point saying to him, do you see why I brought her back? Do you see the trouble you're getting me into, right, with this particular thing? But lo and behold, it has now arrived, Darth Vader's helmet. And
T.A. I am your broadband provider.
that's genuine. I quite like that. That's really good. But it's arrived, and okay, we are where we are with it. But the thing that makes me laugh about all this with the routers and that is, they say, how's your speed now? What's the speed of your broadband and all that now? Yeah, really good, thanks. This will do 678.4 mega. I don't care. My Wi-Fi works well now. It's a bit like saying I'm watching the 100 meters and, Usain Bolt had finished it in 9.6 and the next guy's finished it in 9.7. I'm not going to notice the difference.
For basic broadband usage, there's no real difference noticed in truth. I think the more you notice is when you've got multiple users trying to stream 4K, HD, video games, it's that kind of thing, of which you're not going to be doing. So I do understand it was a bit of a stupid thing from the company to try and pitch that to you.
Yeah, as I've already pointed out in this story, there was me with a pen and paper working stuff out, but I could, folks, and I'm not here to send us back in time, but it is useful sometimes when you're in these situations to actually be able to sit down and work things out for yourself because, actually they don't present things to you in a way. It's all very marketing directed heavy and a little bit irritating actually. So no, you're quite right, Rich. I wouldn't be streaming hundreds of Ks of this and that and all the rest of it. But yeah, so that was my latest. So this season it started with Rich talking about obviously physical media versus the digital media, and it's ended up with me bemoaning coffee shops and broadband, which didn't really see that coming, Rich. But going back to the offline world, this is where I just prefer to be. I don't know, other than doing stuff like this. How about we talk about some recent entertainment experiences? We went to see something locally, which was quite interesting. It was an evening with
John Power?
Power of Past, who are going to be supporting Oasis on their forthcoming large tour. We won't talk about the tickets. I think that's been covered elsewhere. But yeah, so we went to a very local event with him on stage talking through his career and whatnot, which was
That was really good. I really enjoyed it. I have to admit, Cast are one of those bands where I know some of the songs, but I'm not like a mega fan. But I did really enjoy it. He was telling some great stories. I didn't realise he was actually from Liverpool, which is terrible given I'm a big fan of the city and obviously the football team and whatnot. But he's also from the same sort of area that the Beatles were from and things like that. The way that he spoke about obviously joining the Lars, which he was in before forming Cast. There's some really interesting stories there. And then obviously talking about Cast, talking about how they found their fame. The fact that they sort of became famous by supporting Oasis on their initial sort of run in their early tours as well.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think the only thing that we did sort of reflect on was that he didn't play arguably one of, if not one of those renowned hits, which was Walk Away.
Well, no, but he didn't really play anything as a full song, did he? It was kind of him talking, and he had guitars on stage, and he did play little snippets of songs, but he didn't do anything of There She Goes by the Lars or Walk Away by Cast, that I would say are probably the two songs associated with him that most people would know. He did do little bits as we say of things. He did a little bit of Sandstorm, for example, and stuff like that. So there was little snippets of it. But he did at the very end sing a full song, but it's from the new album, and it was kind of, could you have maybe done Walk Away and got everybody singing along and everyone kind of involved in it? But it was really good, and to see it as a local. At a local venue, brilliant. And of course, unfortunately, I could not then join you and Mrs. Shelano post show for a drink because I was at work the next day.
So you quite literally did walk away.
I did indeed walk away afterwards.
I mean, if somebody had said to me, what will be the walk away of that evening, I would have thought it was more likely to be John on his guitar than you, unfortunately, looking at us, walking into Weatherspoons and looking downhearted.
Well,
the pub chains are available.
I will say, before we get onto the last story of something that you went to this week, I did get back from work and I did watch Transformers 1, which is the new animated Transformers film, which I really did enjoy. There were a lot of jokes in it that were quite pretty much for kids, but as the plot went on, it got really good, and there was a throwback to Transformers the movie that had me punching the air in victory. I was so happy that this particular reference was there. There was a couple of references to Transformers the movie, which I'm sure at some point I will bring up my love for. Really enjoyed watching that. Something a little bit different to view for me. It's not often I watch sort of newer stuff. I tend to watch things I've already watched before, but really did enjoy that. But TA, you experienced a live sporting event this week.
I did, yes. Along with a mutual friend of ours, I went to see snooker Players Championship in Telford. And I've not been to see snooker live before. I've obviously played the game, not to any standard or anything like that. And I've obviously seen it on television over the years, but I've never been to see it live. I'm going to tell you, that's a really interesting thing to go to. Great organised event, but it's just so quiet. You know, we live in a time where it's just noise, isn't it? It's constant noise, 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 noise. And it was just so quiet. You're just sitting there, you could hear literally a pin drop, it has to be said. I really, really enjoyed that as an experience. Completely different thing to go and watch and enjoy. So my recommendation, if you're looking for peace and quiet in your life, whether you like snooker or not, go and watch snooker. If they've got an event near you, it's quite a good thing to go and do.
I have to admit, TA, you were telling me about it earlier, and I was thinking, I reckon I'd enjoy watching that. And I'm not a big snooker fan, but I reckon I'd quite enjoy watching that as a live event. And obviously, in your episode of Mind Wipe with Dan on Casting Views, you spoke about the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, and we obviously went to some events there, and one of those was table tennis. And the table tennis was the one where we were kind of like, oh, it's probably, I'd say, probably the best event we went to in many respects because it just had, it just had that kind of atmosphere going on with like the medal ceremonies and stuff. I think there was a lot more where there were English winners, and obviously with it being the Commonwealth Games, everything's not sort of UK, it was split. So it was quite good in that respect, I think. But I don't know.
I don't know. I think if we're asking about the Commonwealth Games, particularly, I did enjoy the table tennis, but I'd probably say I really liked the basketball more than I thought I was going to. I don't know why.
I did enjoy the boxing, I will say.
And the boxing as well was good. But yeah, I think that's the thing. Live sporting events and things that you wouldn't ordinarily go to. I mean, you and I have obviously been to lots of football matches and things like that over the years. But
and wrestling as well. It's a sport, people. That's normally my line, isn't it?
Sports entertainment. Yeah. I think it's great to go and experience different things. And it's, it won't be for everybody, but genuinely, it's such a peaceful and quiet.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not saying Mrs. Shelano makes a lot of row, but she does make a fair bit of noise, and it's difficult sometimes to get a little bit of peace and quiet in your life. And Mrs. Shelano hates snooker, so I've now found the perfect scenario for how to escape Mrs. Shelano while she's wrestling with Darth Vader's helmet to get the broadband running at 200 billion miles an hour or whatever it is they claim it can do. But yeah, so that's been fun.
Before we get into sort of a recap of the season and just reflecting on things overall, would you like to give us a little bit of an update on your writing challenge today?
Well, Rich, today is, at time of recording, day 78 of my 100-day writing challenge, which, obviously I've been updating on. And I'm pleased to say that I have now surpassed 40,000 words written as part of the challenge thus far, which, bearing in mind, when I started the challenge way back at the beginning of the year, I had 35,000 words on my second novel, which is a standalone sequel to The Doctor's Hidden Patients. And I now have 75,000 words. So it's been, genuinely found it massively helpful, though, in terms of dedicating time consistently in organising and planning. Now, I know we've talked about that before, certainly on the podcast, and from this season, Tammy, when she talked through her exploits in kickboxing and planning and organising time, I've really got that with the writing. When you kind of go, that's a really busy day there, I've got this on work-wise, I've got this on, when are you going to fit something in? And thinking about it the night before, the day before, right, I'm going to do that at half an hour or that hour, that kind of time management side of things, where you would so easily let it slip and not do it. And I said to you earlier, I think if it weren't for the challenge, there's no way I'd have written anywhere near 40,000 words in that time. I'd have been amazed if I'd done probably, half that, in all fairness. So yeah, I've been, delighted with the progress, and it's moving me ever closer to a first draft of the second book. And yeah, by day 100, I'll be hopefully pretty close to that kind of milestone.
Wouldn't it be brilliant if day 100 is you literally just putting the final bit of punctuation at the end, the exclamation point or the full stop? There's literally just that one thing. Everything else is there, and it's just I've done.
I think if I could do that for as a first draft final book, as anybody listening who's ever done writing books will know, that's where the pain then begins of trying to edit and all of that side of things. But yeah, absolutely. The closest I can get to being near that by day 100 would be great, really. I think, and it would show the benefit of doing something which, again, we've talked about different challenges, physical, things creatively, or things that are beneficial to your health mentally or whatever as well. It's been a great challenge to do.
Yeah, and I think going back from the challenges, obviously, I've set a challenge which will probably not be a surprise to many listeners that I did not complete with the exercise bike daily challenge. However, I was thinking about that. It's not really been for me at all. It's been one sort of mentally really not a place for me to have been in trying to do it. It's not been great in terms of the exercise bike I have. It's quite old. It's one, I think I said, I had from my parents. It's quite an old one, and I just don't really enjoy the cycling side of things. So it has been a poor show from me uh, in that respect. However, we have both noticed the change in sort of the cooking and me doing a lot more, and there's been some posts on social media of things. One thing that actually got added that we haven't spoken about in a recording, I did a chili con carne last week, and that was amazing. There is actually a video on YouTube of me dishing that up that is out there if people want to see what that looks like. The presentation definitely needs work, but it did taste delicious. Although I was told off by Ruth for having both chips and rice with it, and yeah, I do need to refine that if I'm doing that again and make that a little bit more of a mixture of ingredients and a few greens thrown in there, maybe.
Yeah, Mrs. Shelano talks about sort of brown food. Yeah, she would almost certainly suggest it's worth having some greenery, some vegetables to add into the mix. But I think it looked good. I don't think the presentation was as bad as you say. I've sometimes put things and thought, oh, that looks awful, but it looked fine. And yeah, it's your cooking is where you've really, really taken off.
I've been thinking about the challenges, and actually, I've put a few notes down here, and this is based upon things that we've done through the podcast this season. And obviously, we did the episode you mentioned earlier, the streaming versus physical media and all that kind of thing. So I've noted a few things that I'd like to try and do. I'm not saying I'm going to do them all, but definitely one or two of these out of this list, because I think I've got 5 items here. So one of them is to watch more films on physical media. Um, I own films, believe it or not, that I've never watched. I've bought them to go, I'll watch that at some point, never watched them. So I have things like the Tomb Raider reboot. I have Molly's Game with Jessica Chastain and Idris Elba. I have like a few films like that I've never actually watched. So you know what, you should start doing that. You should start trying to watch some of these movies that you've never watched. Ruth has actually started watching the MCU now, and we've realized to try and watch it together would take forever. So she's borrowed a few of them and watched them. And then we're watching select ones together. We watched Avengers last night, and I was very happy when she said the end fight scene was excellent. And I was like, thank goodness for that, because T.A. and Mrs. Shelano were not fans whatsoever of that movie. Um, but I also have a few other things I wanted to do. So that's like reading physical books more so than on the Kindle. I did read The Doctor's Hidden Patients on the Kindle, and I did manage to get through it on a couple of bus journeys unscathed from people listening to their music without headphones or talking loudly on their phones for some reason. But I've been trying to read Alan Rose's book, Worn with Pride. We spoke to him in a previous episode, and I had it on my Kindle and I was starting to try and read it and really struggled. So I bought the physical copy of the book then. Got through a couple of chapters on the way in to work last Saturday. On the way home, couldn't do it. Just so much noise on the bus on the way home. I just thought, you know what? I've got to find more motivation to just read stuff at home rather than when I'm traveling and stuff. So I'm trying to do a little bit more of that. Obviously, there's the cooking. And actually, going back to the Alan Rose episode again, we spoke a bit about the cooking there with him. And I do think the cooking is not just the cooking of meals for me, but also general eating habits. I need to do less snacking. I need to drink far less pop, he says, as he has a can of Coke Zero next to him whilst recording. Other colas are available. But yeah, I do need to look into that a little bit more. So that's probably the most likely one. The other one I've put in, and this is something quite interesting going back to the streaming versus physical media, is to listen to music either on CD or by local music from an MP3 player. And we've watched a few videos. I certainly have, and I've shown you a few of them where people have modded iPods. I did look up the idea of getting an iPod and seeing what I could do with it. Blatantly on the used market, people have now tweaked. All these YouTubers are doing it and have upped the prices. So it's a little bit out of the way. But I have noticed MP3 players are starting to make a comeback. And not only are they coming back, they have expandable memory, which means you can put more stuff on them. They have Bluetooth connectivity, which is brilliant because I have a pair of Bluetooth headphones. They're nothing special, but they work really well for me. So that's another thing I want to start doing. So I want to try and do this thing like the rest of 2025, where I try and just tick off some of these things. Definitely the cooking being the priority one, but doing a little bit more with some of the other stuff on there as well. Getting away from the algorithm a little bit more really is the thing. Because I have realised, certainly with like Spotify and even like Netflix and things like that, the things that you recommended aren't really the things you want a lot of the time. And I'm finding that more and more. When I first signed up to Spotify a few years ago, I got introduced to some really good stuff, whereas now it's like, I don't really like that. Why am I getting recommended that? So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Speaking of, you've mentioned Netflix, and this isn't something we've spoke about before the episode, and it won't be something I think you'll have watched. But Mrs. Shelano and I have just finished watching Adolescence, this 4-part drama.
I've heard of it. I do want to see that.
That's kind of seemingly taking the world by storm.
It's the one where they shot each episode in one single take, haven't they?
Yeah, using drones, all sorts of stuff. But I mean, Stephen Graham, is in it. Obviously, I think he's probably, one of the finest British actors in a generation. He's just incredible. You feel every single part that he's in. But the interesting thing about this is obviously Netflix have made this show, and they've made it effectively in the UK, but it's gone as a global market thing, which is really interesting because often you used to have where some of the things that are put forward to you on streaming services and all the rest of it, but they're usually not filmed in the UK so much. And this one isn't even set, obviously in London. Obviously Stephen Graham is an actor from Liverpool originally and all the rest of it. So it's really interesting to see a British made drama with British actors, with, accents and all the rest of it, that's been thrown worldwide in that way. It's kind of gone away from, you remember in the old days where a program would be made in a country, and if it was successful, they'd then roll it out and make versions in that country of it. This kind of thing is almost cutting through the streaming service thing, which is, I don't know, it's just an interesting take on it. But that was just something when you've mentioned Netflix that jumped out at me, was that. And it's just great to see something like that. I mean, it's a brilliant drama. Highly recommend it. But yeah, I just thought that was worth pointing out. And obviously, thanks to the What's It provider that I was talking about earlier in the episode, we're meant to be getting that all refunded as part of our package or whatever. So maybe all will not be lost with my 9 hours in a shop. with Mrs. Shelano and a sales.
About those in it, these streaming things, and I know we've mentioned it before, but there's so much content out there now, and I do think there will come a time where it changes. Interestingly enough, actually, just to sort of cap off on the sort of streaming and physical media conversation we've had a little bit of through the season, the rest is entertainment, which of course is co-hosted by Richard Osman, who, of course, for you, a fellow author, and for both of us, a fellow podcaster, and host of a really great quiz show, Richard Osman's House of Games. If you ever need another Richard to host that, BBC, I am available. But but they mentioned this thing about the streaming and the physical media thing actually briefly. And they did say sales of physical media is not as bad as people would think it is. It's not as good as it used to be. They also mentioned, however, things like The Office, the British version of The Office, and it being around the time of DVDs first really coming into the mainstream, which is why it made so much money at the time because of those sales, whereas now they don't sell as much and sort of the profit margins on there. But it was really interesting to hear that, and I'm really hopeful that that kind of content is still out there, that physical media, as I say, because I do think it offers something up to people. And there is, of course, the thing of it being taken away from you. So certainly do hope that's out there and that that is true. They're still selling well.
So, shall we come to the sort of highlights of season 3 of the Middle-aged Podcast? Rich?
Absolutely. I think for me, obviously, we spoke to Dave quite recently, his journey through his treatment of prostate cancer, and that was a really inspiring story. And again, huge thanks to Dave and also to our other guests for the season, Alan Rose and Tammy Lee, for all of their input. I think they both gave some great stories as well. I think all of our guests, very varied topics and talking sort of the physical health, fitness, and also mental health. To have conversations about all of that has been brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the guest episodes, as you say, have been really, really positive. Each very, very different in terms of the story that's been sort of told, but yeah, really, really interesting guests that we've had, and then in between time, the ranting, and that me and you have come across on different things. The obviously the weight loss challenges that we've probably not done as well in as we might have done, and all those kind of things, but updating on the writing and some of the events and things you've been to, and the continued development of your LF to now being actually Ruth consistently in the program. And I think we are obviously a small independent British podcast in the West Midlands, but occasionally there's sort of little nuggets of things that happen, hey Rich, and a celebrity was mentioned in our show and responded to you on social media, I think.
Yes, that was really unexpected and really cool. So you may remember in the episode a few weeks back, we spoke about Liz McLarnon from Atomic Kitten and her no-fly traveller community that she started on Instagram. Just thought when the episode went out that I'd make a mention of it and sort of tagged her on Instagram, and just thought, bit of laugh. She'll never do anything about it. She only went and reposted it on her own story, which was phenomenal, and could not believe that. So you will see a screenshot of that little repost on our Instagram. So that is there. Yeah, that's up on our Instagram. I was over the moon with that, really pleased, and I really do think that's a great idea, the no-fly traveller thing. Obviously, I don't mind flying. I haven't done a lot of it recently. Obviously, went away a couple of years ago to Prague and flew there by myself. But I get it. There's a lot of people that won't want to do that.
So I'm just laughing because the way you said that there, I flew there by myself, sounds like you flew the plane to Prague.
Well, I think it's like I flew like I'm Superman or something.
Well, I should have. That's where I should have got with you rather. But yeah.
But yeah, I went on a solo holiday to Prague, as I say, and but yeah, I think the idea of traveling without flying somewhere, obviously it limits certain places you can go to in terms of the travel time and whatnot, but there is such a great opportunity there. And actually, it's opened up to discovering some other things that I've seen. And I was telling you about off air, some of the things I found on YouTube and on social media, other social media platforms. People who sort of talking about taking the train to various destinations. I was talking about sleeper trains, wasn't I, to you a bit earlier? And someone I found on YouTube who was kind of promoting that. And I do think it's really good, these alternative ways of getting to places, and just it opens things up to people who wouldn't necessarily have had that opportunity in the past. So I do think, to have that response from Liz McLaren from Atomic Kitten, like cannot say, like cannot express how grateful we are for that, because it was just so unexpected. It was brilliant. So and I think you sort of pointed out as well with Dennis Bergkamp and the football and this sort of thing with it. So there are people who don't like to fly, and there is that kind of thing around it. So very interesting, and I think there's probably more of that to come from sort of travel and whatnot. I think there'll be a lot more of that coming around where people are actually trying to do that. You also have like vacation versus staycation and all that kind of thing, don't you? Where there's a lot of people who don't like to go abroad, actually. They'll say, well, actually, there's a lot of stuff in the UK, and yes, the weather's not always great, but there are some great places to see in the UK. So lots of things I think that we could maybe even look at in a future season of the podcast, maybe looking at some travel stories and sort of talking to people about that.
Podcast on tour. Recording episodes in different parts of the country or even the world. Maybe that'll be a challenge. We'll get over to France, obviously without flying, and we'll get there and we'll have to record an episode of the podcast in French.
Bonjour.
Oui.
Je m'appelle Richard.
Merci beaucoup.
Comment allez-vous?
We'll get you over to Spain, which of course you can get to Spain. Don't need to fly to get you there. And muy bien, gracias. Hola. I'm running out of Spanish, but you get the gist. Yeah, there's options there that you could do. But I've just realised actually these ideas require a much bigger budget than we.
Well, exactly.
But why not? We'll sell loads more copies of The Doctor's Hidden Patients and Raging Rich's Recipes, and that'll get us out there, and that'll be done.
You never know. You never know what's
and there
possible.
You go. It's all possible. But there we go. But enjoyed it, Rich, and pleased to say that we haven't talked about. We have done some virtual recording.
We have done virtual,
which we've not done before, and I don't know. Maybe one of the things I'd like to do again in season 4 is Monday night podcast again, because that was a great one. So these are the sort of things we'll bring back. Yeah. Rich, obviously non-studio and studio episodes. There's options there, and for the most part, my season 3 contract I think has been fulfilled. So I'm happy with that.
I think the season 4 contracts should say no more talking about season contracts.
Contracts they're important things, they're important documents, and they've got us to 31 episodes. I'll have you know.
Well, yeah, it has. T.A.'s already mentioned it. We are coming back for season 4. We are going to be taking a little break. We'll be posting some classic episodes and a few other things over the next few weeks, but we will be back. We'll be providing you with some updates on that on our social media. Please do look in the show notes. We have links to the podcast link tree, which will give you all the information that we have on let's try and rattle these off as best as I can. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky. I think I've covered them all.
Yeah.
So we do have links to all of those social media platforms. We're also on YouTube. We do post these episodes on YouTube, obviously without video, but we do put them up on there as well. So if you do want to go and check that out and give us a subscribe on there as well, we would greatly appreciate it. But thank you, T.A., for another great season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Thank you again to all of the guests who have appeared on the show for this season. It has been a privilege to speak to you all. It has been a privilege to get to bring this podcast back for a 3rd season and bring on season 4.
Two best mates, here to take you to stand. Rich and T.A. got your health in the hands. Williams, laughs and tales they tell. For beats and nights, the workouts, they're keeping it real. Oh!